Imagine waking up, sleep foggy, craving that first sip of coffee, only to find your beloved brew suddenly a luxury. This isn't a dystopian novel. It's happening now. A 50% U.S. tariff slapped on Brazilian imports has set off alarms across the coffee world. Brazil, the globe's coffee giant, supplies roughly 1/3 of all beans Americans drink. Flip on the news and you'll hear shop owners, farmers, and economists sounding the alarm. Your morning cup could soon cost a lot more. If you can't start your day without coffee, hit like and subscribe. Trust us, you'll want to stay tuned. We begin in the lush Brazilian highlands, where coffee is king. Brazil is by far the world's largest coffee exporter, sending roughly 85% of its coffee harvest abroad. The United States is its single biggest customer, gulping down about 30 to 36% of America's green beans. To put numbers on it, Americans import roughly 1 million bags of Brazilian coffee each year, a trade worth about $4.4 billion in just 12 months. In effect, nearly 1 out of every 3 beans in your coffee pot traveled from Brazil. But politics has brewed a sharp jolt. In early August 2025, President Trump announced a whopping 50% tariff on dozens of Brazilian products, coffee included. For context, the existing duty on Brazilian coffee was just 10%. A jump to 50% is enormous. This tariff, timed as a broad, reciprocal trade move, was largely a response to political tensions with Brazil's government. Nonetheless, the immediate effect is clear. Everything from Brazilian beef to cocoa is hit, and coffee is explicitly left on the chopping block. Millions of Brazilians breathed a sigh of relief as some key exports, like orange juice and vehicles, were exempted, but coffee got no such pass. The tariff's human impact ripples all the way to your kitchen table. U.S. coffee companies warn this hike will mean higher prices for everyone. Professor Josh Betty of UWS Economics puts it bluntly. Anyone who uses coffee as an input is going to be hurt. All of the consumers are going to pay higher prices, and that's true for every single tariff. In practical terms, expect your grocery store beans and that latte at the cafe to cost more. Some big coffee chains may quietly absorb the hit or find new supply lines. But smaller shops and farmers will feel the pinch most sharply. Across North America, coffee entrepreneurs are already unsettled. In Minnesota, Zachary Lattimore of Alikef Coffee Roasters worries for his small business. His family-run roastery has contracts for thousands of pounds of beans each week. If Brazilian coffee becomes far more expensive, every other country that produces coffee is going to raise their prices as well, Lattimore warns. He's seen this play out before. Brazilian coffee is normally cheapest thanks to fertile land and scale, so a sudden spike leaves roasters scrambling. And while large corporations with deep pockets can navigate import tariffs, small coffee shops may quickly fall behind. Canada is feeling the tremors too. Even though Canada itself imports Brazilian beans at zero duty, keeping its own costs relatively stable, Canadian cafés aren't immune. Local shops report grinding their teeth at climbing wholesale prices. Jacqueline Cusi of Global News highlights how new U.S. tariffs on Brazilian goods are making things even tougher, especially for local cafés in Edmonton. And it's the same story across the border. If Americans complain of higher prices, Canadian consumers feel the market ripple effect in their own bills. If you've noticed your latte creeping up a few cents lately, you're seeing these market forces in action. On the flip side, some point out Brazil's economy as a whole may weather the storm. Brazil sells only about 12% of its goods to the U.S., far less than neighbors like Canada or Mexico. Instead, Brazil has been forging stronger ties with China, Europe, and other markets. In fact, President Lula has dismissed these U.S. tariffs as mere political blackmail, noting that China now takes 28% of Brazil's exports, versus just 10 to 12% to the U.S. Even Goldman Sachs expects Brazil's GDP growth to stay solid despite the tariffs. But for Brazilian coffee farmers, especially the smallholders, the tariff feels like walking on thin ice. Consider Jose Natal da Silva, a coffee farmer in rural Porciúncula, Brazil. He worries the new 50% U.S. tax will literally ruin him. His farm, like many Brazilian coffee farms, isn't a corporate giant. It's a family operation. Al Jazeera reports that family farmers grow about 2/3 of Brazil's coffee. These families already struggled through a brutal drought and plunging global coffee prices this year. Now, with demand at their largest market cut again, Da Silva fears we might lose everything. Experts agree. Small producers have limited capacity to redirect exports or absorb financial losses. If U.S. demand drops, these farmers will fight to find buyers elsewhere. But with razor-thin margins, the extra costs of imported equipment and materials make survival even harder. Worldwide, the 50% tariff is already reshaping trade routes. Traders and exporters are haggling over alternatives. One likely destination? China, whose coffee market is booming. China recently fast-tracked permits for 183 Brazilian coffee exporters, a 5-year expansion to meet surging demand. In fact, coffee consumption in China has been growing over 20% a year, as a new generation swaps tea for caffeine. Europe is another likely stop. The EU slapped no new tariffs on Brazilian beans, so roasters there might import at cheaper rates, and even re-export some of it. Some savvy importers plan stopover strategies, shipping Brazilian beans to Mexico or Panama first, then re-exporting to the U.S., cutting the tariff to only 10 or 15%. Even within the United States, companies are rushing to beat the clock. Reuters reports that beans loaded onto ships before August 6th can enter tariff-free until October 6th. One big player, Down East Coffee Roasters, is frantically exporting its existing Brazilian stock to the U.S. just under the deadline. Meanwhile, backup plans are in motion. U.S. importers may secure more beans from Colombia, Vietnam, or Ethiopia. But as Alakef's Lattimore notes, all coffee prices tend to climb together in a tight market. Through all this turmoil, one thing is clear. Your cup of joe has become entangled in global geopolitics. A simple tariff, just a number on paper, might soon feel very real every morning at breakfast. If you don't want your coffee habit to drain your wallet, consider liking this video and subscribing for real-time updates on how trade wars hit your neighborhood. As experts warn, there's no magic fix. Tariffs are meaningless if coffee keeps flowing. Only the routes and costs change. So whether it's a cafe owner in Duluth, a barista in Edmonton, or a farmer in São Paulo state, lives are being upended. What can you do? For starters, voice your concerns. Small businesses are asking for relief. Coffee lobbyists are already pressing for exemptions in Washington. You can comment below if the thought of a $10 latte, or worse, worries you. Share this video with someone who might care. After all, most of us can't afford to see a daily ritual become a luxury. Behind every cup is a story, one of distant farmers, baristas on the early shift, and families trying to make ends meet. As the global coffee trade shivers from this tariff shock, staying informed is the first sip of action we can take.